Hello YouTube! Hello! And we're back again. As always, of course. Back again, same guy, same stage, the same soundtrack. This is basically my theme song at this point. But hey, I can't complain, I love the soundtrack. So yeah, today, as you guys see on the thumbnail obviously, we're gonna talk about frames, frame data, and before I start, I wanna say specifically what I'm going to be talking about. So this will be useful for people who want to know what frame data is, and maybe there's going to be some stuff for like people that already know frame data. Maybe something helpful is going to show up as well, maybe even for intermediate players or whatever, right? But so specifically, I'm going to say what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about frames, what they actually are. I'm going to be talking about plus frames, minus frames, what they mean and how they work, and I will be explaining it in a way just so you can understand them and use them by yourself without me telling you that, oh, this move is this much plus and this much is this much minus. Let's say you'll understand what that means by yourself. I'll try to explain it that way anyway. I will try my best. So that, plus frame, minus frames. I'll also talk about animations, for example, because animations when discussing frames is very important in general. And animations, I'm going to be talking about frame-specific terms. For example, what does a punish mean? Because everyone says punish, right? What's a punish? And we will also say frame trap, also a lot. Frame trap, what is a frame trap? I'm going to be discussing some of the frame-specific terms, like these ones. And obviously the frame-specific terms we're also going to be discussing is going to be, plus frame, minus frame, startup frames, and the speed of a frame, like what it actually is and stuff like that. Okay, let's actually get on with it. I'm going to start with what frames actually are. So if you look at the top left of the screen, you can see that it says 59 FPS. This means that the game is running right now, not 59, but 60, right? It's 60 FPS, so 60 frames per second. What this means is what you're seeing right now in a single second is 60 frames. Now what is a frame? A frame, it's going to be a little bit easier for me to show you because of this photo mode, right? A frame is literally this. Whenever you pause the game like this, that's it, that's a frame. And when you go like this, right, you can go frame by frame. So picture by picture. If you slow-mo this is how a frame looks like. Obviously, this is very fast, so it's 60 frames per second for the game, right? And this is how it is. Each frame is basically this. That's how an animation works, right? That's just how everything is animated in our face. That's just how it works. And the photo mode makes it a little bit easier for me to explain to you guys. So this is basically what frames are. It's nothing too complicated. It sounds complicated, but it's nothing too complicated. Anyone who has played games before, they would already know this, but still, I explained it. These are what frames are, right? And the frames, let me get out the photo mode, and the frames in Tekken, so I won't be talking about other fighting games, most likely it's similar, but I'm talking about Tekken here, is gonna be used here to measure speed of buttons, of moves, let's say, right? And someone, I was actually one of them when I was first learning, might ask this question: why are we not using seconds like a normal person? Right? It takes, I don't know, 1 second for a move to come out. Which, in a way, you are right. Right? Since 60 frames, if a move is 60 frames, you can say that the move is 1 second fast. It's gonna take it 1 second to come out. If a move is literally 60 frames. By the way, the attack startup frames, right there. Am I pointing it correctly? There, basically, right? The startup frames, it says 10 right there. Which means it's not 60 frames, it's 10 frames. Right? 60 frames would be a second. While 10 frames, that's the sixth of a second, right? And you can say, oh, this move is a sixth of a second fast. Technically, you are correct. You are correct. But when frames change from 10 to 11, now what are we gonna say? Right? Oh, 11 divided by 60 seconds fast. Obviously, we're not gonna say that, right? It's a little bit more math here. As I said, it's not that complicated. You can make it more complicated if you want to, like I am doing it right now for whatever reason. But basically, instead of using seconds, since we already have this, right? We already have a measurement called frames. We're using frames instead, right? So the moment, let me just explain this a little bit further as well, because I don't know, I just like to explain things like this. Like for example, 11 frame speed means that it takes Kazuya right here 11 frames to go from a neutral standing animation, which whatever this is, to this move hitting the opponent, right? It takes 11 frames for that. And this is important because I said this move hitting the opponent. So until this hit happens, it takes 11 frames. that's what the startup frame is showing. That's the speed of the attack. And there are different speeds for different moves. For example, just the 1 button, which is a square 1 button, right? It's 10. 2 button, 12. 4 button, also 12. 3 button, 14. And if you do different combinations, they have different speeds. That is how a speed gets measured, by frames. Because if you want to like dump it down a little bit further, is attack startup frames is how long it takes for a character to go towards from their standing animation to their hitting animation whenever this move hits the opponent, right? It doesn't have to hit it, obviously, but the 10 frames shows that. At the 10th frame, you'll hit them, basically. So that's what I chose. That's about startups. Okay, that's about that. I know it can sound complicated, but it's not that complicated when you understand it a little bit, right? Hopefully I didn't explain it too badly. I wanted to go into a little bit more detail, but that's how it works. And I also mentioned animations, right? This is also very important for plus and minus frames. Because, let's say the opponent is blocking. They normally would be blocking, right? I don't know why I went into photo mode. I messed up. But they are blocking. And now you can see below the startup frames, +1, -1 on both sides. By the way, I would always recommend everyone to have these boxes whenever you're in practice mode, just so you can see the frames. Like, I'm just gonna do this real quickly, but basically it's around here in the display settings, opponent attack info, player attack info, frame info for both. I would advise everyone to have this open at all times whenever you're practicing. Even with the combo damage, the properties and damage, whatever, but at least pay attention to the frames, right, at the lower box. So it says +1, -1. Now, what does this mean? I already explained the startup frames, how that works. I already explained the animations and how that actually works as well. Like, from standing, it takes 10 frames to hit with this particular button, right, with the jab. But now, what the hell is that +1 and -1 saying? Okay, now, whenever you hit someone, okay, make someone block, also hit someone, that I'll talk about that later. Whenever make someone block, they have what we call a blocking animation, right? You see Jin doing this, right, blocking a little bit, and then going back to their neutral stance again. Now, this minus frame and plus frame says how long does it take for them to recover from that blocking animation, or for Kazuya from that, what's it called, hitting animation, to neutral again. And for Jin, when it says -1, it takes Jin longer to recover from the blocking animation than it takes Kazuya to recover from the hitting animation. I know it sounds a little bit complicated, but basically what I'm saying here is Kazuya needs to recover a little bit to get back to a standing animation, right, after the hit. And Jin also has an animation, a block animation, but he also has to recover to go back to a standing animation, right, which is, you know, he's normally standing, from this to normally standing, basically, right? And what this means, the plus frame, minus frame anyway, because we're not showing how long it actually takes for them to get back. What this shows is relative to each other, like each other's characters or each other's players, or whatever you want to say, what's the difference between going back to standing animation. When it says -1, you're recovering a bit slower than your opponent. 1 frame slower, to be exact. That's why it's -1. If it's more minus, let's say this, which is -7 for Kaz, this means that his hitting animation takes 7 frames slower to recover and get back to standing animation than for Jin to recover from blocking to normal animation, right? That's how it works. And this is very, very important to understand, because frames in general are very important in Tekken. If you want to dumb it down a lot, I hear this explanation a lot from everyone, is that if you are +7, let's say with Jin +7, this means that your next move comes out 7 frames faster. This is not accurate at all, by the way, but it is true. It's not actually accurate, technically speaking, but it is true. It is true. That's how it works if you only pay attention to one side of the frames. If you want to really dumb it down, whenever you are plus, basically whatever move you do next is gonna come out that many frames faster. But as I said, that's not accurate. That's why I'm not mentioning it like that. But you can think of it like that, maybe. But whatever I referred to last time when I said the block animation and recovering to standing, that's important. Now, why is that important? That is important Because whenever you are recovering from an animation, you cannot block. For example, when the Kazuya here becomes more than, not more than, -7, in this 7 frames, he actually cannot block here. He can't do it. But whenever the blocking animation does the same thing, let's say he's -5 here, right? He can block. The hitting animation is stuck in the recovering animation to go back to standing. But the other character who's blocking is already blocking, right? His blocking animation stays while he goes back to the standing animation. So he is still blocking. So he can still block even if he's, I don't know, -1,000,000, let's say, right? He can do this. It's -11, let's say. He can still block even while it takes 11 frames for him to recover from, you know, block animation to this animation, right? And the block animation differs between moves, obviously. That's why we have different frames, right? This, for example, is +7. This is 13. This is -1, and it differs based on what's getting blocked. That's what you call having different block animations, basically, right? That's how frames are determined as well, by both the hit and the block. Okay, I know, sounds very complicated, but I said it's not complicated. I didn't say it didn't sound complicated. Aha, got you there, viewer. But yeah, this is basically how it is, and now I'm gonna explain why it's important. Right, as I said, the hitter, whoever does the hitting animation, cannot block in these frames. It says -7, he can't block here. So if attack startup happens for Jin, let's say, that is 7 or faster in this particular situation, right? 7 or faster, you can actually do what we call a punish. So a punish is when you hit someone before they get back to their standing animation. So from their hitting animation to their standing animation, you hit them in between that transition. That's what we call a punish. The fastest move in Tekken, though, I think there might be some exceptions, but basically, fastest move in Tekken, more or less, is a 10-framer, which is a jab. It's a startup frames there, 10, right? So that's why most moves that we call punishable is at least -10 or lower. -11, -12, whatever, right? Example. Kazuya's down forward 2 here, this button is -12. Which means it takes Kaz to go from his attack animation, from his standing animation, which in your standing animation you can block, right? Obviously, you can block when you're just standing there. You can just block normally. But it takes 12 frames for him to get back to it. That's why he says -12, right? So since it takes 12 frames for him to get back to it, Jin can actually use moves that are 12 frames startup or faster, like 11, 10, or faster if it exists, which it doesn't, right? 10 is the fastest. Then you can punish this. And you actually can show up on the screen as a punish whenever that happens, right? So for me to show it, let me just do something about Jin's. It's not gonna be sorry about the controller. It's not gonna be -12, but you see it's -13. Which means if I use a move that's 13 or faster, like for example this, right? This one right here, it says 13, right? And whenever 13 happens, you can see a big punish next to Kaz. That's what we call a punish. And you can use 13 or faster. Let's say I do 12, it's still a punish. Or 11, you can see their startup frames here. Or 10, that's still a punish, right? So this is what you call a punish. A punish is when you catch someone after they do a move before they recover back to their standing animation, because they cannot block in between that. This is important, right? That's why I explained all of that. And also wanted to explain this because I have not seen anyone explain this the same way I did anyway. Maybe because it's too complicated. Maybe that's why, and I'm an idiot. Who knows? I am the idiot for doing this. But I just wanted to do this because it makes sense to me. Also, important fact, not important, but fun fact. In Korea, this punish is actually called a delay catch. And a delay catch is basically what we're doing right now, right? There's a delay between the hit animation and the standing animation. So you're catching them between that delay. That's why it's called a delay catch. Fun fact. But yeah, obviously we're going to call it a punish. Everyone's going to be calling it a punish. This is a punish. That's how punishment works. If you see anything that's -10 or lower, you can punish it most of the time, right? There's other factors, obviously, but I'm just talking about a little bit more in general. Okay, that's about that. But now, what are frame traps? So frame traps is like kind of the opposite end of the spectrum of a punishment. So instead of minus frames getting you punished, you're using plus frames to get an advantage over the opponent. So a plus frame move, for example, is something like this, right? Because for gods, it's plus. And I already explained this. This means that he recovers 4 frames faster than Jin does. Jin's blocking animation is slower from blocking to standing than the Kazuya's from hitting, while blocking obviously, to a standing. Which means that he's actually gonna be 4 frames faster when he recovers. Like, Jin's basically still recovering for 4 frames while he's already recovered and standing, right? That's what it means. This means that whatever button you do next is gonna be faster than Jin's. 4 frames faster, to be exact, right? This means that you can use moves in between that to catch Jin, let's say, trying to press a button. If Jin tries to press a button here while he is minus, which means he's recovering slower than Kazuya here because he is plus, that means that he is gonna get hit if you use a fast enough move. So startups is important here because in +4, if you use, let's say, a 14 frame move, that means that your 14 frame move will beat 10 frame moves from Jin. Because as I said, +4, right? You have to do 14 minus 4, 10. That's how it works. So if a Jin player here, let's say, tries to do a down jab, I'm gonna make him do a down jab right now. From the punishment, because why not? I can do it. Right? He tries to do this down jab, which is 10 frames fast. You can see in the attack startup. I'm gonna do it. Right? He does a down jab. That's 10 frames fast, so he's trying to interrupt you and press a button. What you can do to stop this is press a button that's faster than this down jab. Which usually a faster move than 10 frames, as I've said, doesn't exist. But since you are plus, this 10 frames is after he recovered. And you're recovering way faster here, which means your down forward 2 will trade with it, because as I said, you do +4. You are +4. Not only that will trade with it, but it will also be traded with, let's say, a 13 frame move. Because this 13 frame move will come out in like 9 frames. You can think about it that way. I already explained that. But if you think about it that way, it's not correct per se, but in practice it works. I'm just not saying it that way because I think it's oversimplifying it. I like overcomplicating things. Okay, don't sue me. So, yeah, basically, that's how it is. And whenever you're plus, doesn't matter what plus you are, let's say this situation +5, right? You can use the same kind of moves to trap someone so they can't press. If they press, they're gonna get hit, right? That's the main idea behind it. So this into a 13 framer, that's gonna become 8 because you were +5. This become this, right? Into a 12 framer, that's gonna become 7 because you're +5. But if you're +4 and do 12 there, you down jab there, but doesn't matter, right? If you do a 12 there, that's gonna be 8. That's how it works. If they press, you're gonna catch them. Obviously, in here it didn't work because there's also like 3 parties: high, mid, low. I'm not gonna be mentioning that, but high cannot beat lows. Not lows, or even special lows or special mids. Doesn't matter. Okay, I'm not gonna explain that right now. So yeah, this is important. This is what we call a frame trap. I explained punishment, I explained animations, I explained frames, plus frames, minus frames, I explained startup frames. Right? All of that explained. Hopefully some of this was helpful. Maybe I missed some stuff that I said I was gonna talk about. Maybe I missed something, but the most important stuff I did already talk about, which is how animations work, how frames work, how plus frames work, how minus frames work, how frame data works in general. Always have these boxes. I would recommend both of them, but at least the lower one. On your practice mode, pay attention to your startup frames, your minus frames, and whenever this happens, now you know what's actually happening on the screen. Not just assuming it like, oh, it's my turn now, but actually what's happening on the screen. For the people who actually want to know, obviously some people also are okay with just thinking like, okay, I have an advantage now, so my next frame is faster. But this is a little bit more in the details, not in details, but yeah, more complicated basically. But when you think about it, it's not complicated at all. It just sounds very complicated, but as I said, this is in detail. Also, I don't know about the thumbnail, but like clickbait. Is it clickbait? Is it complicated, guys? Maybe it is complicated. Maybe it is. But yeah, everyone, thank you for watching. Big thank you. I really appreciate it. And I'll see everyone in the next one. Till then.